in my experience, it's really a misconception that bookkeepers are really busy in January or during tax time. For the majority of things, I really finish work mostly throughout the year, and then in January, I'll do like a quick check of everything and then send it off to my client's accountant. So just this week, I took one morning and I did an entire client's, like what I would consider like closing the books. It's not even really closing the books, but I did their year-end stuff. So while it's fresh in my mind, I thought I'd chat with you guys about the process and let you know how long it took. It took me almost exactly 3 hours. So if you have a ton of clients, an extra 3 hours per client might be a lot of added workload, but I will say some of this stuff could have been done in November or December, like kind of toward the end of the year if I wanted to like spread it out more. All right, so I jotted down a list of the things that I did, like the main things, and I'll kind of give you a deeper dive into most of them or a few of them. So first of all, I categorized, I checked over all the categories, I did ask my accountant, I analyzed something, so I analyzed their advertising and how profitable it was, so I'll talk about that. I classified the income, which is part of categorizing actually. I communicated with my client's accountant, and I also sent a year profit and loss to my client, and then there was also some payroll reports in Gusto that I had to download and then give to the accountant. So the first thing was categorizing. You guys know what that is. I was about 2 months behind, so it just took a little time to like catch that up. And then, yeah, like I said, the income needed to be broken down as well. That this client breaks down income more than most and applies it to different people. All right, now let's talk about how I did the year-end check of the entire year of books, so all of 2024, and what I found and changed. And I can show you guys generally how I do a full like proofread of my clients' books. So I just go to reports, and then I go to a profit and loss, and then I do last year, and I do it by month because I like to just see that, because I don't know, it like shows, you know, there should be some things should have something for every month. And this is the sample company, so it only goes back a few months, but you get the idea. So then I can look at each thing and kind of analyze, does it look normal? Like, okay, we have job materials. 1 month it was 131, then it was 431, then 8. Oh, and then it was 3,000 in December. So maybe I could click into December and see, why did we spend so much on job, you know, whatever that was called, job materials in this 1 month. And then that would kind of give me clarity, like, oh, we had this really big purchase. That's right. Okay, we bought a bunch of sod. So that actually makes logical sense. And then I would just continue down pretty much the whole thing. All right, I made it a little smaller so you can see. Sometimes I'll click into this total here. Like if I want to know, let's see, I don't know, all the pest control services. I wanted to know if it was $70 every month. So then I would click into here and it would be like, oh yeah, it's pretty consistent. So we've had 35, 35, 35. Then there's something weird happened. It was a credit for this 100. That makes sense to me. And then, you know, it went up to a different amount. So you can kind of see, you know, if it's something that you want each month. So I used to actually pull a profit and loss detail, which is definitely another option. So you can just do a profit and loss detail like that. Same thing, you could do it for the months, or actually probably just last year would make sense. Then it has every single, it's kind of like what I said, just without clicking into everything. So then it has, you know, the design income and it lists it all out. So I used to do that, but because that client, I feel like pretty comfortable with the accuracy of how it's been done, and I've kind of been keeping up on it all year, I didn't feel like I needed to go through every single transaction like this. I more like spot checked things that looked kind of weird. All right, so now I'll let you know the 4 examples of the things that I found wrong, the types of things, and then what I did to change them. Let me know in the comments if you prefer a screen record for this part, like a screen record of QuickBooks. Sometimes I feel like I lose people when I show the QuickBooks screen because it's maybe more boring. I don't know, but I know it's also helpful to visualize. So I might do some of both. All right, number 1, there was some income in the wrong spot, which this is like really obvious because I was going through the expenses and there's something that says a negative expense, which means it's income, you know? So then I was like, why is there a negative expense right there? And then I was like, oh, it's not an expense, it's income. That was just a really silly mistake. And why it happens is because the name, like when I'm typing the name, it is the same, like it has like the same first 4 letters or whatever. I think it was someone's name. So the name was in there twice. And so I should have just realized, oh, I need to do the income one, not the expense version of that very similar named thing. I actually think I might name them differently now so that doesn't happen again. All right, and then I had a payroll question. I was actually going to bring this to the accountant because I don't know why it would happen. Pretty much my payroll always syncs perfectly, and the accountant's like, oh, it's balance is perfect it balances out perfectly. So it just looked weird to me because there was in this one category, I forget which category it was, there was something in every single month, and then December it was just 0. So I'm not sure if that's like a timing thing, like it got recorded out of that month or what, but I was just gonna double check that because there wasn't any like problem, like Gusto wasn't showing any problem, but that was just kind of weird. All right, number 3 thing I changed was I just reclassified a few things. In some cases, there was like an expense that was like the only one or only one of a couple in the whole category. So maybe it was called fees or something, and there was only like a couple transactions. So I just added those fees into like the bank charges or something. So I just picked a different category that made sense just so that the profit and loss would be more streamlined and have fewer categories. All right, and the 4th thing I did was just kind of personal preference. I reclassified a few things in Ask My Accountant. So what happened last year was I had a few questions in Ask My Accountant for the actual accountant. There was like 3 things in there. Is like, can you just look at these and see if you can tell what they go to? I wanted to group them together so they weren't lost in all the payroll stuff. They were payroll things, so the accountant could have visibility for those things. And what he ended up doing was writing journal entries to offset them. I'm guessing they were duplicates, so they were already in QuickBooks, and so the journal entry just needed to zero them out. But it was bothering me because there was these 6 things sitting in Ask My Accountant, and how I pull the report for that is I always just do it all dates because I want to see everything that's in there. If I had just pulled the year, it would be showing in the previous year, so it wouldn't show up. But because of how I pull that report for all dates, I don't like it just hanging out there. And so I actually just categorized those 6 things into a different place. I think it was like miscellaneous expenses, and that was 2023. So that will be sitting there, so we'll still have visibility to those journal entries if needed, but they won't be cluttering up my current workflow. All right, and then speaking of Ask My Accountant, I had actually sent a list previously to my client, so I just had to categorize all the things that were in there based on the client's information, and some things I used logic to figure out what they were, or, you know, a couple things I actually looked up the vendor on the previous year to see like, what was that vendor? It seems vaguely familiar, but it wasn't something we used a lot. So anyways, this whole process is just looking over the whole thing, like a proofread, if you will. I used to be a copy editor, so I really like to proofread things. All right, and then I did an analysis of the advertising budget because when I looked at it, it was $41,000, which seemed like kind of high to me. And so I wanted to be like, is that reasonable, or are they spending too much on advertising? So I will let you know how I did that now. All right, so here is how I did a pretty quick analysis of one part of my client's business, just because I noticed that the advertising budget was pretty high. So it was $41,000, almost $42,000. And so, of course, a big part of this is how much money are you making? If you're making $5 million, then this is probably reasonable. So one thing that I did to start out with was there are 2 types of income that this client has. One is dependent on advertising and one is not. So I only wanted to analyze this number based on the half that is dependent on advertising, right? So I filtered out that number. I forget exactly what it was, but I just did the 41,000 divided by that income. So I think I got like 7 or 8% being spent on advertising. And so then I Googled that to see if that is a reasonable amount. And it was kind of hard to tell from Google because it depends on the type of business you have, the size of the business, and all these different things. But overall, I gathered that that is within the realm of reasonable, maybe a little bit on the higher side, but not like outlandishly crazy. So I wanted to share with them that 8% being spent on advertising. And then there was like 3 main vendors that were being used. I deleted the vendor tab or the vendor column because I wanted for privacy reasons, but you can kind of get the gist that all of these were one vendor that equaled this much, equaled $12,000. There was a bunch, probably all these ones were equaled $19,000 for a different vendor. And then of course there were some expenses that weren't with these 3 main ones. And then there was an amount that equaled $8,000. So I know one of these, I believe this one maybe, is for their website, and like they have people doing SEO for that. That's probably important. I don't know if it is kind of expensive at this amount per month. It seems kind of expensive, but overall I feel like that's fine-ish. This is the one that I thought was expensive. This is for like a billboard. It's like a little billboard on a park bench. And I'm not sure how many billboards there are, but basically spending $12,000 for those billboards, I was like, in my opinion, that is not worth it to me. But of course, I'm not making these business decisions. I just see it as my job to bring the data to my client and be like, oh, you're spending this much on the park bench, this much on your website SEO blog thing, and then this much on whatever this vendor was. And then they can decide, like, do I really want those park benches going forward? If it was me, no, but they can make those decisions. Or do I want to spend a higher percentage on advertising? So this is just an example of, I'm not giving crazy, super sophisticated financial advice, but just as normal, logical numbers person, I can present the data in this way. So that analysis actually probably took a bigger percentage of the 3 hours. It would have probably taken only 2 hours if I hadn't done that ish. But that is an example of how you can be helpful to your client if you're going through the books and with a fine-tooth comb and you notice things like that. It is very reasonable for you as a bookkeeper to bring it to your client's attention. All right, and then to finish out the year, kind of obvious, I reconciled the bank account and then I communicated with the accountant. This accountant is actually already in the QuickBooks account, like they are listed as an accountant in the QuickBooks Online file. So they don't need me to send them reports necessarily, but I do like to just communicate with them and be like, the year is totally complete. It is ready for you. I'll send them a list of any questions I have and let them know, we can chat about things if needed. And then I emailed a profit and loss and balance sheet to my client along with that advertising analysis that I did. I think pretty much every year I make some kind of video about like year-end closing or how to get ready for tax time, stuff like that. So if you want that as inspiration, if you're trying to get motivated to get stuff done for taxes, to get stuff to your accountant, all that, I will leave some of those linked in the description box, or you can also search my channel just maybe for the word tax or something. So solidarity, this can be a little bit busier time. Like I said, it's not crazy busy for me as a bookkeeper, but I understand there's just like more tasks to get done sometimes. Let me know in the comments how your tax season is going, and I'll talk to you again next week. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. That helps me out a lot. Bye.